Hi, I've had a couple questions on equipment, so we'll introduce a few collars. We have a flat collar, which people use basically for their ID tags and identification. You can walk a dog on this, although you'd have no control. You don't have a lot of control if the dog decides to go chase the squirrel. So you want a lot of training if you're going to use this for a walking collar. I basically use this collar for just decorative. If I'm going to town, this is going to be his collar that's on him other than a training collar. Or if I'm traveling, I put his ID on it. We also have a Martingale collar. The one I use happens to be leather with the chain. This works similar to a slip lead. As a correction, you can pull on that on your lead and it will choke down on the dog. A nicely trained dog, you don't have any problems. They recognize a correction just by a slight tug. You also have this slip lead, which is another word for it is a choke collar. You want to make sure it's on your dog properly. I'm dyslexic, so the P's and Q's of this doesn't work for me. I always make sure that the straight bar is on the top of the neck. The way it works is when you give a correction, it locks down. When you let go of the leash, it loosens up. It's just basically that simple. Now, if you have it on backwards and the straight bar is down below, you can give a correction, but there's no reward as the chain stays tight. It does not loosen. So you always want to make sure this lead is on the dog properly. So you give the correction, it tightens around the neck, and then when you let loose of the lead a little, it's going to loosen up around the dog's neck, and that's his reward, and he picks up on things quite easily that way. This collar is the prong collar. It does have the prongs. If used properly, there is no injury to the dog. Of course, any collar can injure the dog if used improperly. So make sure that this is fitted on your dog properly. All collars should be up around the dog's neck, around right behind his ears. Rain, come. Rain. So this is Rain, and you want this basically fitted right up. All collars should be fitted right up, right behind the ears. This is where your control is. If it's down lower, down here, you're working against the animal's power. Up right behind the ears is their tender area, and they respond to things much more readily. And it's much easier to work with your animal. So all collars should be up right behind the ears. The flat collar can ride down a little bit lower, but like I said, I would not recommend using a flat collar as a walking tool. There's just not a whole lot of control with this collar. Myself, I like to have the Martingale. She works well with the Martingale. My male, when I walk him, because he is so strong and he can have a little bit of dog aggression, I do use the prong collar. The prong collar also, I have found that with most dogs, if you use the smaller links, they tend to respect it faster than if you use the larger links. The larger links might make your dog look bad and all that. Make people think that your dog is vicious, but I mean, who really wants people to think their dog is bad? So I use mine basically for that extra control with my male. Since he is a little on the dog aggressive side, I have more control over him, since I do run into a lot of people that seem to think that their dog has the right to say hello to all dogs. So anyway, that's the different collars. or at least the collars that I have. I will say one thing on the leashes. A 6-foot leash is the standard leash that most people work with, which is fine. I use a 6-foot leash a lot. I do like a 3-foot leash to make sure my dogs stay closer to me, and I don't have a need for them to go 6 feet out for any reason anyway. So the 3-foot leash tends to be really nice for me and my dogs. I do not recommend at all using a retractable leash. They're dangerous for your dog, you, and especially other people. I know of a little boy that was almost decapitated because he was riding his trike and somebody let their dog run across the sidewalk where the boy was riding his trike, and the lead caught him right under the chin and came close to decapitating that little boy. Also, it's very easy to break those. So if your dog takes off running and doesn't hit the brakes when he reaches the end, it can snap really quick. Most of them tend to snap where most of the line comes flying back at you. I've seen some pretty bad damage that way, and I've also seen dogs that end up getting wrapped up in that line when the line snapped closer to the handler and they were pretty cut up themselves. Dogs can get tangled up in them very easily. There's no control, so if your dog is a little bit further away from you, walking out on his line, and all of a sudden a loose dog comes around the corner, you've got no control of what your dog is doing. So a shorter leash, no longer than a 6-foot lead, is recommended for use. So thank you very much for listening.